but I'd like to start off just by saying welcome to the final meetup of the Tech and Tie-dye community for 2020. We're really excited that you've come on this journey with us from March at the beginning of this year to where we are now. We're really proud of the progress of this little meetup community, and starting a couple of weeks ago, we've had partners, some of our tech partners, knocking down the door trying to get a slot for 2021, and we want to see how this grows, and we want to see what's valuable to the community. And exactly that is why we've got two amazing sessions planned tonight, but I'll touch on that right now. And you can see my screen, right?
Yeah.
So the agenda, I'm just going to just go through what the Tech and Tie-dye community is for all of our new members, and then just going to introduce our amazing speakers for the evening. So for anyone that hasn't been to one of our meetups before, the Tech and Tie-dye community is a place where it's an open and inclusive community where everyone has a seat at the table. We share ideas, we learn together, and we get the opportunity to connect with each other. And it's important that we kind of create our own narrative with where we want tech events to go. And this is exactly what we're trying to do with this community. We've got an incredible speaker from Bold Curiosity, the founder and owner, Celeste Swart, joining us tonight. And she's presenting Developing a Culture of Curiosity and Self-Directed Learning. We scouted Celeste, and from minute one of the call we had to set up to talk about the meeting, I knew this was a perfect fit for this community. I'm really looking forward to this session. Thanks a lot for joining us, Celeste.
Thank you, Charles. Thanks for having me.
It's the pleasure is ours. We're going to take a lot of insight from your session, but we really just want to thank you for joining us, taking some of your personal time, and for joining any of the meetups this year. Thank you, and we'd like to invite you to join us again in 2021, where we head to Cloud Native Nirvana, and we'll tell you some more about that in the coming months. But over to you, Celeste.
Awesome. Thanks again, guys, for having me here. It's such an honor for me to be talking about this notion that drives me, which is how do we build learning systems that really focus on skills development for everyone in the room, not just for a certain group of people. And it's not only my work, but it's my passion and it's my life calling as well. So as it goes with one's passion, you do get a bit excited and carried away. So if you see me glancing, I'm just checking and holding myself accountable for the time. I have come prepared with some thoughts and ideas based on my work experience and my life experience, but I would like to engage with a few questions towards the end of the presentation if we have enough time. Okay, so my story, when you get that question, like, tell me more about yourself, and people usually dread the question. Well, I love the question. I love the question because I get to tell people about what drives me as a person. And I define myself with four key indicators. Firstly, I'm a learning strategist. So anything to do around adult learning, how to maximize learning, how to build enabling systems in any environment from a learning infrastructure perspective is my thing. It floats my boat. I absolutely love it. And I can really get my teeth synced into that challenge. So I consult with businesses to help them with that. And then also design learning solutions. I'm often facilitating workshops on a number of different areas. A huge part of my work, and where I generate a lot of my income, is around graduate development, so helping young people transition to the world of work across a number of different industries and fields. So that's the first thing. Secondly, I'm an ambassador for curiosity in my own life. So I'm always curious, always going out there to learn about something. There's always an itch, and then I go off on a tangent, and I absolutely love it. I'm also doing my master's at the moment in philosophy, where I'm studying curiosity and self-directed learning as two constructs. And I love the word curiosity so much. I've got it in my business name and identity. And I suppose it's about me embracing who I am, which is a deeply curious person, and also my wish for other people. I am a pioneer, so I'm the first of in my community, in my family, which I don't take that role for granted. With, you know, it comes with a lot of pressure, but um, that is an important part of who I am. And I am a thought leader in my field as well. I'm always needing to be on the cusp and the cutting edge of what's happening in the adult learning space. And that's what I'm going to share with you, some tips and techniques. And I think whatever industry we find ourselves in today, we all need to be thinking about either our own learning journey, how we can maximize learning in different spaces, and or how do we manage the learning journeys of the people around us. And that's especially true for people who are in a management position, a leadership position, whether you're coaching someone. You do need to think about, like, what is the best way that that person learns and how can we maximize it. So when you say, ask me, like, what is the essence of my work, like if you could boil it down to what's that one statement, it's this. I would say that I design and implement a learning lab for people to connect to and practice their agency as inside out leadership. I think developing learning competence and confidence doesn't only give people a learning skill, it makes them feel that they've got options. So when they leave the room, they suddenly have a different insight on how to solve a problem and they feel empowered. And so it is about increasing our agency, which is why I think the work that I do is so important. So I'm going to go into a bit of an overview, which I've kind of started dabbling in now. I'll talk about the historical context around adult learning, because I think that is super important and really gives us an idea of why some learning experiences unfold the way that they do. I'll talk about the relevance for today, and then I'll share some tips with you. So if I look at this year, wow, you guys, what a year it's been. 2020 in its own category, like just different from any other year. I mean, in my short life of 43 years, I've certainly never experienced anything like we are this year. But I think, you know, I found some of these what I think are really funny images that describes this year. So like out of a rating of 1 to 5, you know, I'd give it a 1, would not recommend, and my 90-day trial is up. I would like to unsubscribe from 2020, and my absolute favorite is, before I agree to next year, can I please see the terms and conditions of what next year has in store for us? I think, you know, we talk about the fourth industrial revolution, we talk about VUCA, we talk about disruption, and this year has been all of that rolled up into one plus some more. So it really has been disruption in every shape and form. We've had very little time to prepare, certainly from a people development support and learning perspective. And what that has meant is that it's got us really thinking and questioning so much of the learning infrastructure that we've built historically. We started to question the relevance of that, and we started thinking about how do we need to adapt to make sure that we are fit for future, and in fact not even future, for the present, you guys. So to understand adult learning and to think about how we support adults in the learning space, we must acknowledge the roots of adult learning. And fortunately and or unfortunately, adult learning is so deeply entrenched in pedagogy, which is all of the study and work around education and children's education. And I've included like a bit of a write-up from my thesis here on the slides. I'm not going to read everything. It's the end of the day, we all fatigue. But the big thing I want to say is that it's a system that was solidified in the 12th century, you guys. And the big thing about pedagogy is that it is built on the assumption of the learner depending on someone else for information and depending on someone else to drive their learning. And it was in the year 1926 that a consciousness and awareness started emerging around adult learning and whether we should be using pedagogy, and you know, how do adults actually learn? How do we change to suit that audience? And it was in 1960 that we really saw a boom on this topic around adult learning, and people really starting to give it the focus it deserves. So in many ways, the body of research and all of the insights we're formulating in the space is relatively new. So I, as somebody who is in the adult learning space, I'm always looking at reports that looks at the future. What are the growing skills? What are the declining skills? What does the future world of work look like? Because that helps me think about how to support young people and young talent coming into organizations. And I love this image, and this is taken from the Future of Jobs report from the World Economic Forum. It's a global perspective, but very much relevant to our African continent and to South Africa as well. And it says that it's given us this list of top 10 skills required for 2022. And in fact, I'm very interested to see after this year, when they do another snapshot, you know, what happens to this list, because I think some of these things have just become even more important. And number 2 on that list of growing skills is active learning and learning strategy. So this is not just my perspective, it's a global view where that people are saying we need to equip learners, and this is specifically looking at adult learners. We need to get them to think about how to learn. You know, we always learn about content, but we hardly ever learn about how we learn, and it's 2 very different conversations. And so when I look at the body of knowledge, I'm drawing from 2 main streams. On the one hand, I'm looking at Malcolm Knowles and his body of knowledge on self-directed learning, and then I'm also looking at curiosity from a very much a motivation perspective. So I'm not going to go into too much detail. To come back to my key question for tonight, so with all of this in mind, with all of this important context and information and the burning platform that has happened, which is this year and going into next year, how do we drive a culture of curiosity and self-directed learning? We don't have the privilege anymore of people going on formal courses. We don't have the learning infrastructure in our organizations that perhaps we used to have. Training budgets are being cut. However, we know people still need to equip themselves. People need to learn to be agile. They need to take ownership for their learning. So how do we do that? Whenever I think about this question, and this question is always floating in my prefrontal cortex somewhere, it's the thing that I'm constantly thinking about. I've always got this model in mind, and this is an important model because it gives so much insight into why we should be considering this question and why it's everyone's business, not just people like me who are in the people space, literally everyone. So what is the process we go through when we learn and we acquire new information? Usually, and this is obviously genetic, we start at the point of unconscious incompetence. So I don't even know what I don't know. And then in some way I get exposed to this new skill, this new process, this new system that I need to learn. And I suddenly become aware of the gap. And then I move into what we call conscious incompetence stage. So I know what it is I don't know. What then happens is I teach myself, I do a course, I come to one of these events, I go into YouTube, I start to learn I acquire the skills, but it's still very slow and deliberate because I almost need to remind myself of the steps, what's the order I need to follow. And at that point, I move into what we call conscious competence mode. So I know, but it's very, very slow and it's very deliberate. And like I said, I always need to go to the reference guide to go, which step do I need to follow now again? And then with repetition and enforcement and getting good results, I move into the unconscious competence. That's when I just, like I'm slaying for the gods. I'm just doing the most. If you think about driving, when you get to that point, you just get in your car and things go into muscle memory. You're no longer thinking like first gear, clutch control, K53. You know, I've been driving for so long, I don't do K53 anymore. But for if you look at a new learner, we get comfortable when things are just a lot more, things are more seamless. And so that's when I get to that stage. And then new people coming into the business look at me and go, wow, she's like, she really knows what she's doing, or he knows what he's doing. I want to be like that person. So that's typically the stages we go through when we are learning. So how do we support people on this process? It was really hard for me to narrow down which tips I'm going to share in this short period, because I can literally talk about this topic for months, you guys. But okay, these are the things I've decided to spotlight this evening. Firstly, I call it the learning GPS. And the first thing is your learners need to have an idea of the end goal and the destination. People need to know what they are working towards. What's that bigger goal that they're moving towards? When I learn a new skill or when I acquire something, I know what I want to move away from. And this is what am I moving towards? So learners must also be able to assess their own progress towards their goals and objectives. It's not somebody else's job to come and tell you this is where you are with your learning. The learner should be able to, at any given point, do a bit of a dipstick and check, I could be a third of the way, or actually I'm 80% there, I've just got a 20% gap. And I always say to coaches, to managers, to mentors, the responsibility of this must remain with the learner. It's so tempting to jump in and take over, but it's the learner's job to be driving this and managing this GPS. And also, it's really the best way to get engagement into learning, buy into learning, to get people to be excited to learn, is to make sure that the responsibility for learning lays with the other person. Now, the challenge with that is not everyone learns the way we learn. So when we coach someone else, we typically coach in the way we like to learn. And I think sometimes there's a bit of fireworks between the learner and the coach because we want to impose our way of learning on others. And in this system, if we really want to create autonomy, which I think is absolutely key, be it in the workplace, be it with parenting as well and teaching our kids at home, let the learners sit with the GPS, let them drive, let them kind of manage the road there. And you are the wisdom on the side, giving support and giving guidance when needed, but it's respecting where the learner wants to go. Secondly, we need to create an environment that's conducive to learning. Learning does not just happen on its own. It's very much connected to other qualities like trust, openness, respect, humility, support, encouragement, and challenge. This isn't a soft, like, we're going for a walk, we're sort of hugging the trees and we're being all kumbaya. There is that supportive space, but there comes a time on the learning journey when we also have to hold up the mirror to the person and say, this wasn't cool. Here's what I suggest you do differently. But I think when we build it on all of these other qualities like trust, etc., it's so easy then to be open and give feedback and push. Some of the work I absolutely love in the space is Nancy Klein. She talks about the components of the thinking environment. And I don't know if you guys are able to see this very faint image over here. If you can't, don't worry, go and Google it. And I'll also, you guys will have the slides afterwards to look at it. But she says, and I love this statement, like every time I read it, I get such a cool feeling. But she says that the quality of everything we do, absolutely everything, depends on the quality of the thinking that we do first. And so our job as a learning partner, as a learning coach, as a boss is to be thinking about how do we set up thinking spaces in our businesses? Do we shout at people? Do we insult people in spaces? Are we constantly interrupting? Or like, if you want to get my blood pressure to go from 0 to 100, interrupt me while I'm speaking. Like, babes, that's the end of our friendship right there. But also, it's so sad for me to see how interruption has become the norm. And I think a big part of that is that we've taken that rat race mindset and mode that we operate in, and that's now, it often guides our conversations and the way we engage with each other as well. And actually, when you interrupt someone, you will never know the insight the other person was going to have. And even more sadder is that they will never know what insight they were about to have. They might have been at the cusp of like breakthrough thinking, or maybe it's not breakthrough thinking, but the point is that when we stop that, like, we will never know, and neither will the other person. And so just encouraging a thinking environment in our spaces is absolutely conducive to fostering curiosity and self-directed learning. And this statement, which is a statement and a challenge all rolled into one, Nancy Klein says that the quality of your attention directly impacts the quality of the other person's thinking. So when someone is in a conversation with you, the way they think, what they come up with will mirror back to you the quality of your attention. So in other words, give someone full attention, give them good quality attention, their level of thinking increases. And usually when I talk about this, the first bit of kickback I get is when people say, but we're busy, you know, we don't have a lot of time. And I always say that I'm not here to say you suddenly need to carve out 5 hours in your day to listen to everyone, you know, one-on-one, because that's also not realistic. But if someone comes to talk to you and you've only got 5 minutes, make sure that you give them the best 5 minutes ever. And the easiest way to do that is don't look at your phone, don't look at your laptop, keep connection with the person. And you know what? When you slow down for those 5 minutes, the return on your investment is the person's quality of thinking increases, so they don't constantly need to come to you like every day with the same question. And I know you can relate to this. Like after the third time of the person asking you this question, you think, but like, bloody hell, like, why do we constantly get stuck with the same problem? It could be because you need to look at the way you're engaging. And so when we do that, when we use these little opportunities to give people good quality education, attention, their level of thinking increases, their dependency on you decreases, their autonomy increases. And so that's essential to learning and self-directed learning. Another, I must really be careful. I keep saying like one of my favorite, every slide is one of my favorite, but the power of reflection, I think is oh, excuse me guys. The power of reflection is absolutely vital to good quality learning. Kolb has given us this learning cycle many, many years ago, but what he has identified is 4 main phases of learning adults need to go through. And here's the thing, he says that if you want to get good quality learning, you need to make sure that you go through all of these phases. And I think, or my observation of someone who's been in my field for more than 20 years is people do, and then there's a quick meeting and then they do some more. So we don't spend enough time on reflection and conceptualization of what we've learned. And when we can see the value of this and go through the full learning cycle, that also then becomes an enabler in our learning environment. And I always remind myself of this quote. My mentor shared this with me. I have no idea where she got it from, but thank goodness to the person who came up with this. But it says that the brain doesn't only learn from new information, but the brain also learns from reflection on existing information. And so we must create space for reflection. And very closely linked to that is an insight. Like, how do we create spaces for insights? Do we actually know what an insight is? Like, have you ever asked yourself, we always talk about the brain and the mind and a thought and an insight, but what is a mind? What is a brain? Or maybe I've just been studying for too long, you guys. Like, I don't know, maybe I need to be having a lot more coffee. But I always entertain these thoughts, because I think if we want to encourage people to have more insights, we need to be clear on what an insight is so we can support the person and then measure it afterwards. So, you know, and the big thing here is, how do we facilitate these insights and thoughts? And one of it is that we don't get better. We don't learn better by cramming information. You know, the way we used to learn at school. Let me study the next 10 chapters verbatim, word for word, and then spit it out with exam. And then, yay, I get like, you know, the person who gets 10 out of 10 is deemed to be the most intelligent person in the room. With adult learning, it's about insights. It's about taking content and making it relevant to my world. It's taking content that's new and connecting it to the hooks that already exist in my brain. Other content. It's about making connections. It's about having different thoughts on what I know. So we have insights by creating space for connections in the brain. And you know, people always say like, I have my best ideas when I'm in the shower, when I'm in the bath, and it's because of the water. Here's the thing. Sorry, you guys. I mean, my star sign is Aquarius, so I'm all about the water. It's actually not about the water. It's about the fact that you are stopping, you creating space for neurons to start firing in the brain, and these little, you know, dendrites here to be connecting to each other. And it's in the stillness, when we create a sense of stillness in our minds, that we are able to have insights. It's why sometimes, when you're cooking or you're doing something completely unrelated to that complex problem you were trying to solve an hour ago, and suddenly you go, I get it. This is now what I need to do. It's because you've created space for your brain to do what it needs to do, create those connections, and that usually solves your problem. Curiosity. I was not going to do this without having a slide committed to curiosity, you guys, but I hear people talking about brainstorming in meetings, and I like the question of question storming versus brainstorming. And that's about, when we start our meeting, how many questions can we generate about the issue that we're trying to solve right now? And we can do that in a team meeting, or we can do it on a one-on-one conversation. So encourage learners to ask questions. Now here, I think this also requires quite a bit of commitment, because think about a child. When a child is born, they are beautifully curious. They learn every day. They don't install an app, download an app to tell me how to be curious. They explore. They take in so much. The brain is firing at any given point. But what happens is, as children grow up through sometimes the home environment, definitely the school environment, and go back to our definition of pedagogy, children are not always encouraged to be curious, and so they lose it as they grow up. And then they come into the world of work, and we say, be innovative, solve problems, think, and all of these require curiosity. So we really need to work hard at getting people to connect to that very innate quality they had when they were younger, but they were taught through conditioning that it's not desirable to be curious as a person. And so our job is to make people fall in love with curiosity again. Simple and not simple at the same time. And by the way, what I do when I study, because I was a very problematic learner at school, I can't just regurgitate and spit back to you. Like, I want to know why. I want to know how it's relevant. I want to talk to people. I want to get practical. And so when I study, I first always highlight all my questions that I need to answer at the end. And then I take in my information, because then I've created these hooks in my mind, and the information can land onto these hooks. And so again, this is another reason why curiosity is so important. Again, the learner is the driver. Please remember that, guys. The responsibility for learning must remain with the learner. And if we go to the definition of self-directed learning, and Malcolm Knowles is some of the seminal work in this space, it says, firstly, self-directed learning is a process in which the individual takes the initiative, with or without the help of other people, in diagnosing their own learning needs, formulating their own learning goals, identifying the resources that they're going to use to facilitate their own learning, choosing and implementing learning strategies, and they will evaluate the learning outcome at the end. So yeah, in all of this, you can see that the learner needs to be in control, and they need to be driving. The magic of a growth mindset is another way that we foster self-directed learning. And I've just given you this image, which I think beautifully describes the difference between a growth and a fixed mindset. A fixed mindset is when you say, I can't do it, it's too difficult, I'm either good at something or I'm not. So I'm very sort of black and white in my thinking, where a growth mindset is where I tell myself I can learn anything I want to. We know that the brain, we know about neuroplasticity in the world of the neuroscience of learning. So the brain can learn anything it wants to learn. Your effort and your attitude will determine your abilities. It's not an intelligence that's preset. It's all about the work you put into learning that will help you learn. And so really fostering a growth mindset with our learners, and especially our children at home, becomes so, so important. That's another topic that I can speak about, and I hope I'll get to speak about in future, but growth mindset is important. And when we look at these models, I always try and get very practical and say, but how? Because these things always look wonderful on paper and on presentations, but what can we do in the moment to actually implement this and practice this? So you want to have a growth mindset? Try this with your kids at home, for those who have kids, otherwise with people in the workplace as well. Instead of saying, I can't do something, make sure your sentence ends with yet. I can't do something yet. Hear the difference between the two. I can't do it versus I can't do it yet. Yet means that I've got capacity. I can develop the skills if I want to. I just need to give myself a bit of time and I will get there. So add yet to the end of the sentence. And my last point here with this growth mindset is, let's try and say practice makes permanent versus practice makes perfect, because perfection doesn't exist. And actually permanence is, the more we do something, more it becomes embedded in our brains. The myelin sheath, the fatty sheath around those neural pathways becomes thicker and thicker, and the thicker it is, the more embedded it is, the more we can use that insight and the skill that I've learned. So try that with your kids. Practice makes permanent. Getting to the end of my presentation, mistakes are a gift, you guys. We need to unlearn this culture that we've created everywhere, that mistakes are an embarrassment, the shame culture, and it's why people usually don't own up or don't always get the most value out of mistakes when they're learning. Mistakes are a part of the learning journey. They are not to be avoided, but they are to be embraced. And so to wrap up my slot, I want to just say that we've heard the word pivot this year a million times, like to the point where sometimes I don't want to hear the word anymore. Just when I'm talking about it, it's okay. But no, but seriously, guys, I think what all of this has taught us and continues to tell us this year is that perhaps it's time that we have a learning pivot and use this year to see the importance of that. So the question I want to leave you with is, what do we need to unlearn, learn, and relearn about learning to get better at learning? Thank you very much.
Celeste, this was fantastic. I really want to thank you for joining us tonight. This is the perfect kind of platform for this content, and hopefully we see you soon again on this. You know, there's so much opportunity to bring you back and talk more, and I really appreciate you taking the time. It seems your warm-up talk worked at the conference today. Thank you very much. If anyone has any questions for Celeste, please send me an email at techandtiedye@lsd.co.za. Celeste, how do we reach you?
Okay, so yeah, you can, I mean, Charles, you've got my contact details, but on the socials, my business page, Bold Curiosity on Instagram, my Twitter handle is Boldly Celeste, and my business Facebook page as well, Bold Curiosity, and then LinkedIn, people can reach me there as well.
Fantastic. I'll put it all up in the meetup group when this is done. But I really want to thank you so much for joining us tonight. We loved it. We loved it all.
Pleasure. Bye, guys.
Thanks a lot, Celeste. Bye.